The abandonment captain stood in the command center of Research Station Prometheus, watching the viewport as hundreds of dark shapes materialized from hyperspace. Each vessel was massive, their hulls covered in jagged armor that looked like it had been forged from broken worlds. The Krill had arrived and they brought destruction with them. Elena was 42 years old, with silver threading through her dark hair and sharp green eyes that had seen humanity reach for the stars. She had commanded Prometheus for 8 years, overseeing scientific research in the Outer Rim territories. The station housed 3,000 souls, scientists, engineers, families, and a small security detachment. They were researchers, not warriors. Now they faced an armada that had destroyed 6 civilizations in the past decade. The communication officer, Lieutenant James Park, turned from his console. His young face was pale with fear. "Captain, we're receiving a broadcast from the lead Krill vessel. They're demanding our immediate surrender. They claim this sector now belongs to their dominion." Elena's jaw tightened. "Send a distress signal to the Galactic Union. Priority Alpha. Tell them we need immediate military assistance." She watched as James worked frantically at his console. The Galactic Union was humanity's great achievement. 35 years ago, humans had joined the ancient alliance of spacefaring species. The Union promised protection, trade, and a place among the stars. Humanity had contributed technology, resources, and personnel to dozens of Union initiatives. They had earned their place. They had earned protection. Dr. Sarah Chen, the station's chief scientist, stood beside Elena. Sarah was brilliant, barely 30 years old, and her research into quantum communications had won awards across Union space. "How long until Union forces can arrive?" she asked quietly. "At maximum speed, the nearest Union fleet could be here in 6 hours," Elena replied. "We just need to hold out until then." The Krill fleet began moving closer. Their weapon systems powered up, casting an eerie red glow across their hulls. Prometheus had defensive shields and a handful of point defense weapons meant for deflecting asteroids, not military-grade assault. They would last minutes against this force. James looked up from his console, his expression confused. "Captain, I'm receiving a response from Union Command. It's not what we expected." "Put it through," Elena ordered. The holographic display activated, showing High Chancellor Vorin of the Union Council. The Vorin were an ancient species, tall and slender, with skin like polished stone. They had been part of the Union for over 2,000 years. Chancellor Vorin's face was expressionless as he spoke. "Captain Voss, your distress signal has been received and analyzed. The Union Council has convened an emergency session regarding your situation. After careful consideration of all factors, we have determined that military intervention is not advisable at this time." Elena felt her blood turn to ice. "Not advisable? Chancellor, we have 3,000 civilians here. The Krill will kill everyone if we don't evacuate or receive protection. We understand your concern, Captain. However, the Krill Dominion is a significant military power. Engaging them over your station would risk a broader conflict that could destabilize this entire sector. The Union must consider the greater good of all member species." "The greater good?" Elena's voice rose despite her training. "We're Union citizens. We've contributed to every initiative you've asked of us. The Mutual Defense Accord guarantees protection for all member worlds and installations." Chancellor Vorin's expression didn't change. "The Mutual Defense Accord contains provisions for strategic assessment. Your station, while valuable, does not represent sufficient strategic importance to warrant full military engagement with the Krill Dominion. We estimate that defending Prometheus would require deploying 3 battle groups, which would leave critical Union territories vulnerable." Sarah stepped forward, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. "You're telling us we're not worth saving? That you've calculated our lives and decided they don't matter enough? We are telling you that difficult decisions must be made in the interest of galactic stability," the Chancellor replied. "We recommend you negotiate terms with the Krill for the safety of your personnel." Elena felt something break inside her. "Negotiate? The Krill don't negotiate. They conquer and exterminate. You know this. Everyone knows this. We cannot help you, Captain. The decision is final. May fortune favor you." The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center. 3,000 people were about to die, and the galaxy's greatest alliance had just turned its back on them. Elena looked around at her crew. James was crying silently at his console. Sarah stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Security Chief Marcus Webb, a former military officer with graying hair and hard eyes, clenched his fists so tightly they shook. "Captain," Marcus said quietly, "we need to evacuate now." Elena nodded slowly. "Sound the evacuation alarm. All personnel to the escape ships. We take everything we can carry. Research data, supplies, weapons, anything that might help us survive." The station erupted into controlled chaos. Families rushed to gathering points. Scientists frantically downloaded years of research onto portable drives. Engineers grabbed tools and equipment. The escape ships were designed for emergencies, small vessels that could carry 50 people each. Prometheus had 60 of them, modified cargo haulers that would be cramped but functional. The Krill fleet opened fire before everyone could evacuate. Energy beams tore through Prometheus's shields, ripping into the station's outer sections. Alarms screamed as hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. Elena coordinated the evacuation from the command center, refusing to leave until everyone else was safe. "Section 7 is breached," James reported. "We've lost contact with Evacuation Group 3, 150 people. Gone in an instant." Elena forced herself to focus. "Seal the section. Redirect the remaining groups to alternate routes." Marcus appeared at her side. "Captain, the last group is boarding now. We need to go." Elena took one final look at Prometheus, her home for 8 years. The station that represented humanity's hope and ambition was dying. She turned and ran with Marcus toward the last escape ship. They launched into space surrounded by dozens of other small vessels, all fleeing in different directions. It was the only strategy that made sense. Scatter and hope the Krill couldn't chase them all. Behind them, Prometheus exploded as the Krill fleet poured fire into its core reactor. Elena's escape ship headed for the outer darkness, away from Union space, away from the civilizations that had abandoned them. 2,700 survivors scattered across space in fragile ships with limited supplies. They had been cast out, left to die by those who had promised protection. As Earth and all human colonies received word of what happened, rage spread through humanity. When other human stations and ships requested Union protection, they received similar responses. Humanity was alone. The Union had deemed them expendable, not worth the cost of defending. 3 months later, the last human ship left Union space. Captain Elena Voss led the survivors into the unmapped regions beyond civilized space, into an area known only as the Void Sectors. The galaxy believed humanity would die there, lost in the darkness. The galaxy was wrong. The transformation. 7 years passed in the void between stars. In that darkness, humanity transformed from victims into something the galaxy had never seen before. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the command center of Sanctuary Station. The hidden base humanity had carved into a massive asteroid deep in the void sectors. Marcus was 50 now, his hair completely gray, but his eyes burned with fierce intelligence. After Prometheus fell, he had become the driving force behind humanity's survival and transformation. The station thrummed with activity. Where Prometheus had been a research facility, Sanctuary was a fortress and factory combined. Every human survivor had worked themselves to exhaustion building it. They had taken apart their escape ships, salvaged every scrap of technology they could find, and created something new. "Dr. Webb, the test is ready," called out Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres. She was 35, a former engineer who had been on Prometheus as a junior technician. Now she led the weapons development program. Marcus followed her to the observation deck overlooking the testing range, an empty section of space marked with sensor buoys. Floating in the void was humanity's first true warship, the Wraith. It didn't look impressive, just a modified cargo hauler with strange protrusions and an irregular hull. That was intentional. Initiating adaptive camouflage, Rachel said, pressing controls. The Wraith seemed to flicker and then vanished, not truly invisible, but its hull had transformed to match the background radiation of space perfectly. To any sensor sweep, it would appear as nothing more than empty void. Adaptive camouflage holding at 98% efficiency, Rachel reported with satisfaction. And that's just the first layer. Show them the rest. The Wraith suddenly lit up with weapons fire, but these weren't standard energy weapons. The beams twisted and phased, designed to penetrate shields by existing partially in subspace. They had learned this technology by studying a derelict alien vessel they'd found in the void sectors, then improved upon it. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Excellent work. How many Wraith-class ships do we have operational? 23, with another 40 in production. We're also completing the first Phantom-class destroyer next month. Over 7 years, humanity had done what the Union thought impossible. They had survived. More than that, they had grown. The void sectors were far from empty. They were filled with abandoned technology from extinct civilizations, rich asteroid fields, and resources that no one had bothered to claim. Humanity claimed them all. They had also found others in the darkness. Species that the Union had abandoned or deemed too primitive to join. The Kelrath, a reptilian race whose homeworld had been strip-mined by Union corporations then left to die. The Shen, crystalline beings who communicated through light patterns, dismissed as non-sentient by Union xenobiologists. The Torvan, massive beings who lived in zero-gravity environments considered too expensive to accommodate. All of them had been cast aside. All of them had survived in the shadows. And all of them answered when humanity reached out offering alliance, trade, and mutual defense. Captain Elena Voss entered the command center, now promoted to admiral and overall commander of human forces. She looked older but harder, tempered by 7 years of struggle. Marcus, we've received confirmation. The Krill supply convoy will pass through the Theta 7 corridor in 48 hours. This is our chance, Marcus nodded. For 7 years they had watched and waited, learning everything they could about the Krill Dominion. The time had come to announce their survival to the galaxy. Assemble the strike force, he ordered. It's time to show them that humanity didn't die. 48 hours later, the Krill supply convoy moved through the Theta 7 corridor, 12 massive cargo vessels escorted by 4 warships. The convoy carried weapons, ammunition, and supplies for Krill forces occupying former human territories. They traveled confidently, their sensors showing only empty space around them. The Wraith Squadron attacked from every direction at once, materializing from nowhere. 23 ships against 16 Krill vessels. The odds seemed bad, but the Krill had never faced humanity's new tactics. Commander Jackson Cole led the assault from his ship, the Vengeance. Jackson had lost his entire family when Prometheus fell. Now he channeled that rage into precise, devastating strikes. All ships phase weapons armed. Target their engines first. Don't give them time to call for help. The phase weapons tore through Krill shields like they weren't there. The escorts tried to respond, but their weapons couldn't lock onto targets that kept flickering in and out of normal space. Within minutes, all 4 escort ships were crippled, their engines destroyed. The cargo vessels attempted to flee, but the Wraith Squadron was faster. One by one, they were disabled and boarded. Human Marines in advanced combat armor stormed through the Krill ships, securing cargo and taking prisoners. These weren't the researchers and scientists who had fled Prometheus. These were warriors forged in 7 years of hardship and rage. The entire operation took 27 minutes. When it was over, humanity had captured 12 supply ships and taken over 300 Krill prisoners. More importantly, they had sent a message. Jackson stood on the bridge of the lead cargo vessel, looking down at a captured Krill commander. The alien was tall and muscular, covered in armored scales built for war. It glared at Jackson with 4 yellow eyes filled with hatred. "Tell your Dominion," Jackson said coldly, "that humanity survived. Tell them we remember what they did. And tell them we're coming for them." He released the Krill commander with a single escape pod, programmed to reach the nearest Krill outpost. Let them carry the message. Let them spread the fear. News of the attack spread across the galaxy within days. The Galactic Union Council convened an emergency session. How could humanity have survived? How could they have built a military fleet capable of striking the Krill? Chancellor Vorin addressed the council, his stone-like face finally showing concern. "This is troubling. We believed the human problem had been resolved. If they have military capability, they could destabilize the balance we've worked to maintain." Representative Kessa of the Talon Collective, a bird-like species, spoke up. "The balance? You mean the balance that serves the old powers while abandoning everyone else?" "I've been reviewing communications. 7 other species in the past decade have requested protection against aggression. All were denied. All were told they weren't strategically important enough. That is classified information," Chancellor Vorin said sharply. "Then perhaps it shouldn't be," Kessa replied. "The humans survived because you left them no choice. And now they're showing that survival is possible outside your union. That's what really worries you, isn't it?" The council chamber erupted in arguments. But in the darkness beyond their debates, humanity continued to build, to plan, and to prepare. The first strike was just the beginning. Admiral Elena Voss stood in Sanctuary's command center, watching reports come in from across the galaxy. Something was changing. Species that had been silent for years were suddenly finding their voice. Questions were being asked about the Union's decisions, about who deserved protection and who didn't. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I think we've lit a fire we can't control." Marcus smiled grimly. "Good, let it burn. The old order failed us. Time to build something new." In the shadows of space, humanity had transformed from victims into catalysts for revolution, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Reckoning. 2 years after the first strike, the galaxy stood on the edge of transformation. Captain Elena Voss, now Supreme Commander of the Free Species Alliance, stood before the assembled representatives of 47 different species. They met in a massive space station humanity had constructed in the void sectors, a facility they named Liberation. The Alliance had grown beyond anything Elena had imagined. After humanity's strikes against the Krill demonstrated that resistance was possible, other abandoned species had reached out. The Kelrath brought their expertise in environmental engineering. The Shen contributed advanced computing technology. The Torvan provided incredible strength and zero-gravity construction capabilities. Together, they built something the Union had never allowed, a true alliance of equals. Elena looked out at the representatives, seeing hope in faces that had known only despair. "We gather here not as subjects or subordinates, but as partners. Every species here has been deemed expendable by the Galactic Union. Every species here has survived despite being abandoned. Today we show the galaxy that we're done hiding." On the main view screen, intelligence reports scrolled past. Over 2 years, the Alliance had conducted 73 operations against Krill forces, liberating 12 occupied worlds and rescuing over 8 million beings of various species. They had also defended 7 independent worlds from other aggressors, asking nothing in return except friendship and cooperation. The galaxy was taking notice. The Union couldn't ignore them anymore. Dr. Marcus Webb stepped forward, now serving as the Alliance's chief strategist and technology director. "We have something else to share today, something that will change everything." He gestured, and a holographic display activated showing recovered data files. 6 months ago, our intelligence operatives infiltrated a Union archive station. What we found proves what many suspected. The Union knew about the Krill invasion of human space. They knew 3 months in advance. And they deliberately chose not to warn us or prepare defenses. Shocked murmurs filled the chamber. Even though many suspected betrayal, seeing proof was different. Marcus continued, his voice hard. "The Union didn't just abandon us passively. They actively decided that our destruction served their interests. Internal communications show they believed removing humanity would simplify resource allocation in our sector. We were sacrificed for bureaucratic convenience." Representative Kessa of the Talon Collective, who had joined the Alliance 6 months earlier, spoke up. "This isn't just about humans. We've found similar patterns for other species. The Union operates on a calculated hierarchy. Elder species are protected at any cost. Younger species are protected only if convenient. If you're not profitable or strategically located, you're expendable." Elena stepped forward again. "We're broadcasting this evidence across every communication channel in the galaxy. Every species will see the truth. But we're not doing this just for revenge. We're doing it because the galaxy deserves better." She activated the master transmission. Simultaneously, 40,000 relay satellites positioned throughout Union space began broadcasting. The evidence flooded every channel. Communications, financial records, strategic assessments that coldly calculated the value of species and worlds. It showed the Union's true face stripped of noble rhetoric. The reaction was immediate and explosive. On Union worlds, protests erupted. Younger species demanded answers. Some elder species, horrified by what had been done in their names, called for reforms. Others defended the decisions, arguing that difficult choices were necessary for stability. The Union Council convened an emergency session. Chancellor Voran looked older, the weight of revelation showing in his stone-like features. "This information has been taken out of context. The decisions made were necessary for the preservation of galactic order." But his words rang hollow. Representative after representative stood to challenge the council. Species that had silently suffered for decades finally found their voice. Then Elena Voss appeared in the council chamber itself. She walked in with Marcus Webb, Commander Jackson Cole, and Dr. Sarah Chen, who had become the Alliance's chief diplomat. They were accompanied by armed guards from a dozen different species, all wearing the silver and blue of the Free Species Alliance. "This is a closed session," Chancellor Vorin protested. "You have no authority here." "We have the authority given to us by 47 species who refuse to accept your hierarchy," Elena replied calmly. "We're here to deliver an ultimatum." She stepped into the center of the chamber, surrounded by representatives of civilizations far older and supposedly more powerful than humanity. But she stood without fear, backed by evidence of their betrayal and the strength of those they had abandoned. "The Free Species Alliance is offering an alternative," Elena announced. "A true partnership where every species has equal voice, where protection isn't contingent on profit or strategic value, where decisions are made through consensus rather than calculated interest. We've proven it works. We've defended worlds, defeated aggressors, and built prosperity without hierarchy." "You've built nothing," sneered Council Member Trath of the Dorvani Empire. "You hide in the darkness with other failures, striking from shadows like pirates." Marcus stepped forward. "We built a fleet of 200 warships in 7 years with limited resources and no support. We've developed technology that surpasses your best innovations. We've created an economy that feeds 8 billion beings without exploitation. And we did it all while you sat in your comfortable chambers deciding who deserves to live." Sarah added in a quieter voice that somehow carried throughout the chamber. "We're not asking you to dissolve the Union. We're telling you that you're not the only option anymore. Species can choose. They can accept your calculated protection, or they can join an alliance that values all life equally." Chancellor Vorin stood, his composure finally cracking. "If species leave the Union, there will be chaos. The economy will collapse. Trade routes will fail. You're risking galactic stability for idealistic principles." "Stability?" Elena's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "You mean your stability, your control, your power. The stability that allows elder species to prosper, while younger species are sacrificed when convenient. That's not stability. That's tyranny with better public relations." She activated a holographic display showing the Alliance's territory. 30 systems have formally joined the Free Species Alliance. Another 80 have requested association status. Over 200 billion beings are choosing our alternative. You can call it chaos. We call it freedom. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some representatives demanded the Alliance be disbanded by force. Others called for investigation into the Council's decisions. A few quietly but significantly expressed interest in learning more about Alliance membership. Over the following months, the galaxy fractured. The Galactic Union didn't collapse entirely, but its authority cracked. Elder species maintained their membership, along with civilizations heavily invested in the existing power structure. But younger species, peripheral worlds, and those who had been marginalized began joining the Free Species Alliance. The Krill Dominion, weakened by years of guerrilla warfare with humanity, found itself facing a united front. The Alliance launched a coordinated campaign that liberated the last occupied territories within 8 months. Without the element of overwhelming force, the Krill were just another aggressive empire, and they fell back to their core worlds. A year after Elena's appearance at the Union Council, she stood once again in the command center of Liberation Station, but this time with different thoughts. The Alliance had grown to 87 member species. They had established trade networks, defense pacts, and cultural exchanges. It wasn't perfect. Disputes arose, resources were strained, and growing pains were inevitable, but it was theirs. Marcus joined her holding 2 cups of genuine Earth coffee, a luxury now that humanity had reclaimed some of their former agricultural worlds. "You know what bothers me most?" he said thoughtfully. "We spent 35 years trying to fit into their system, believing that was our destiny. It took losing everything to realize we could build something better." Elena accepted the coffee gratefully. "Do you think it will last? Can we really maintain an alliance this size without falling into the same patterns?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "But we've built in safeguards. No species gets more votes than others. Protection isn't negotiable or conditional. Decisions require broad consensus. It's messy and slow, but it's fair." Sarah Chen approached carrying a data pad. Supreme Commander, we're receiving a communication from the Galactic Union. Chancellor Vorin is requesting a formal meeting to discuss cooperation between the Union and the Alliance. Elena and Marcus exchanged glances. Cooperation? What kind? Trade agreements, coordinated defense against external threats, scientific exchange. They're proposing we operate as parallel organizations rather than competitors. It seems they've realized they can't eliminate us and that forcing species to choose sides only weakens everyone. Elena considered this. The Union had betrayed humanity, had calculated that billions of lives weren't worth saving. Part of her wanted to refuse, to let them suffer the consequences of their choices. But that was revenge thinking, and revenge wouldn't build the future they needed. Set up the meeting, she decided, but make it clear we're negotiating as equals. The Alliance doesn't answer to the Union, and we won't compromise our principles for convenience. If they want cooperation, it will be on terms that respect all species equally. As Sarah left to arrange the meeting, Elena looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity's homeworld Earth was being rebuilt. The scars of krill occupation were slowly healing. Other species were reclaiming their homes too, worlds that had been written off as lost. Commander Jackson Cole appeared on the view screen from his ship. Admiral, we've detected some unusual activity on the galactic rim. Looks like another species trying to establish themselves. Early readings suggest they're refugees from somewhere beyond mapped space. Should we investigate? Elena smiled. Send a diplomatic team with the usual offer. Friendship, protection, and partnership if they want it. And Jackson? Tell them they're not alone. Tell them they've found allies. As the Alliance fleet moved to welcome potential new members, Elena reflected on how far humanity had come. They had been left to die, dismissed as not worth saving. They had survived through determination, ingenuity, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept extinction. But more than that, they had transformed tragedy into purpose. They hadn't just survived for themselves. They had created something that protected others from suffering the same abandonment. The Free Species Alliance wasn't about human dominance or revenge. It was about ensuring that no species would ever again hear those terrible words. You're not worth saving. In the end, that was humanity's true strength. Not their technology or their tactics, but their refusal to accept that any life was expendable. The galaxy had mocked them, abandoned them, and left them to die, and humanity had responded by proving that even the abandoned could rise and create something better than those who cast them aside. Their payback wasn't destruction. 5 years after the formation of the Free Species Alliance, humanity faced a new challenge that would test everything they had built. Commander Rachel Torres stood in the intelligence center of Liberation Station, staring at data that made her blood run cold. At 40 years old, she had become the Alliance's chief intelligence officer, and what she had just discovered would shake the galaxy to its core. Get me Supreme Commander Voss immediately, Rachel ordered, her voice tight with urgency. Within minutes, Elena Voss entered the secure briefing room, accompanied by Dr. Marcus Webb and Admiral Jackson Cole. Elena was now 54, her hair completely silver, but her eyes remained sharp and commanding. She had led the Alliance through diplomatic victories, military conflicts, and the complex work of building a new galactic order. Nothing rattled her easily, but the expression on Rachel's face gave her pause. What is it, Commander? Elena asked, taking her seat. Rachel activated the holographic display, showing streams of encrypted communications intercepted over the past 6 months. We've been monitoring deep space transmissions as usual, looking for threats to Alliance members. 3 weeks ago, our analysts noticed a pattern. Communications between certain Union Council members that don't match their public positions. We managed to decrypt them yesterday. The hologram shifted, displaying text communications between Chancellor Vorin and several other Union leaders. Marcus leaned forward, reading quickly, his expression darkening with each line. They're planning to eliminate the Alliance, Marcus said quietly. Not through open warfare, but through systematic destabilization. Rachel nodded grimly. It's called the Shadow Protocol. They've been implementing it for over a year without anyone noticing. The plan is elegant and brutal. First, they identify Alliance member species with internal conflicts or economic vulnerabilities. Then they secretly fund opposition groups, spread propaganda, and create crises that make Alliance membership seem like a burden rather than a benefit. She pulled up more data showing financial transfers, covert operations, and carefully orchestrated incidents across Alliance space. Look at this. The food shortage on Kelrath Prime 6 months ago? That wasn't crop failure. Union operatives poisoned 3 agricultural centers. The terrorist attacks on Shen communication nodes? Funded by Union intelligence. The pirate raids on Torvin mining operations? Those pirates are using Union military equipment. Jackson's fists clenched on the table. They're trying to make our member species blame the Alliance for failing to protect them. Make them think they'd be safer returning to the Union. Exactly, Rachel confirmed. And it's working in some places. We have reports of growing anti-Alliance sentiment on at least 15 member worlds. Some governments are quietly discussing withdrawal. If enough species leave, the Alliance collapses and the Union reclaims its monopoly on galactic power. Elena sat back, her mind racing through the implications. How extensive is this operation? How many Union members are involved? At least 30 council members actively participating, with tacit approval from most of the elder species. They've allocated resources equivalent to maintaining a full battle fleet. This isn't a rogue operation. It's official Union policy, just completely secret. Marcus stood and paced the room, his scientific mind analyzing the problem. We can't simply reveal this information like we did with the abandonment evidence. The Union learned from that mistake. They'll deny everything, claim the evidence is fabricated, and turn it into a propaganda war. We'll lose credibility, especially with species already doubting the Alliance. Then what do we do? Jackson demanded. We can't let them destroy everything we've built. Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence displayed before her. Finally, she spoke. We turn their own strategy against them. If they want to play shadow games, we'll show them that humanity learned from the best teachers, survival in the darkness. She turned to Rachel. I need you to assemble a special operations team. Not military, not official. People who can operate without direct Alliance authority. We're going to infiltrate the Union's covert networks and dismantle the Shadow Protocol from the inside. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. Supreme Commander, that's effectively authorizing black operations against the Union. If we're discovered, it could trigger open war. If we don't act, the Alliance dies slowly while our members suffer, Elena replied. I won't let that happen. We've fought too hard and sacrificed too much. Over the next 2 months, Rachel assembled her team with meticulous care. She needed specialists who understood covert operations, but also believed deeply in the Alliance's mission. People who could operate in moral gray areas without losing sight of why they were fighting. She found them among Alliance members who had suffered under the Union's calculated abandonment. There was Kira Shen, a crystalline being whose light-based communication made her nearly impossible to detect in electronic systems. Thorak of the Torvin, whose massive size concealed a genius for infiltration and disguise. Lieutenant Maya Hernandez, a human intelligence officer who had lost her parents during the Prometheus evacuation. And leading them was someone unexpected, former Union Council member Kessa of the Talon Collective. Kessa had resigned from the Council 2 years earlier and joined the Alliance, disgusted by the Union's corruption. Now she sat in a secure briefing room on Liberation Station, looking at the team Rachel had assembled. You want us to penetrate Union intelligence, identify their Shadow Protocol operatives, and neutralize their operations without being detected, Kessa summarized. That's essentially impossible. Difficult, Rachel corrected. Not impossible. You have advantages they don't expect. The Union thinks the Alliance operates openly, honestly, with clear rules and oversight. They're not prepared for us to fight dirty because they believe we're too idealistic for shadow warfare. Maya Hernandez spoke up, her voice carrying an edge of bitter experience. They're wrong. Humanity learned how to fight dirty when we survived 7 years in the void sectors with no support and hostile forces hunting us. We learned that ideals are worth fighting for, but you can't win by playing nice with people who want you dead. Thorak's deep voice rumbled through his translator. The Torvin were nearly exterminated before the Alliance saved us. We understand survival requires difficult choices. What exactly do you need us to do? Rachel laid out the plan. The team would infiltrate Union space using false identities and forged credentials. Kessa's knowledge of Union procedures would get them access to secure facilities. Kira's unique abilities would let her penetrate electronic systems without leaving traces. Maya's intelligence training would help identify key operatives, and Thorak's strength would provide security when things inevitably went wrong. Their mission had three objectives. First, identify every operative involved in the Shadow Protocol. Second, gather evidence that couldn't be denied or dismissed. Third, sabotage the operations in ways that looked like accidents or internal failures rather than Alliance interference. If we do this right, Rachel explained, the Union will think the Shadow Protocol is failing due to incompetence, not because we're actively dismantling it. They'll waste time investigating their own people, creating paranoia and distrust within their intelligence apparatus. The team launched their operation from a converted merchant vessel that regularly traveled between Alliance and Union space. To any inspection, they appeared to be legitimate traders, Kessa returning to Union territory for business, accompanied by her diverse crew. Their first target was a Union logistics station orbiting a neutral world. According to intercepted communications, this facility coordinated much of the Shadow Protocol supply chain, routing weapons, funds, and equipment to covert operatives across Alliance space. Maya and Kira went in first, posing as systems technicians hired to upgrade communication arrays, while Maya distracted the facility's security chief with fabricated technical concerns. Kira's crystalline form interfaced directly with the station's computer core. Her light-based consciousness flowed through the data networks like water, invisible to standard security measures. Within 3 hours, she had copied every file related to the Shadow Protocol and planted subtle corruption in the station's logistics algorithms. Over the next few months, supplies would be routed to wrong destinations, funds would transfer to incorrect accounts, and orders would arrive garbled and incomplete. The Union operatives would receive no support while wondering what had gone wrong with their supposedly secure supply chain. Phase 1 complete, Kira reported as they returned to their ship. I also left surprises in their security systems. Any investigation will reveal that the problems originated from Union intelligence headquarters itself, making them suspect internal sabotage. The operation continued for 6 months, with the team hitting target after target across Union space. They were ghosts, never leaving evidence of Alliance involvement, always making their sabotage look like Union mistakes or internal betrayals. On Draven 4, they intercepted a shipment of weapons meant for anti-Alliance terrorists and replaced the contents with defective equipment that would malfunction at critical moments. On Kelrath Prime, they identified the Union operatives who had poisoned the agricultural centers and anonymously provided evidence to local authorities, triggering arrests that looked like routine law enforcement. On the Shen homeworld, they traced the terrorist funding back to its Union sources and rerouted the money to Alliance humanitarian programs, making it appear the Union had accidentally funded their enemies. But the most significant operation came when they infiltrated Union intelligence headquarters itself. Kessa's former credentials, combined with forged updates Kira created, got them past initial security. Then Maya's training helped them navigate the labyrinthine bureaucracy, while Thorak remained on the ship ready for emergency extraction. Deep in the headquarters' secure archives, Kira found what Rachel had hoped for, the complete Shadow Protocol database. Not just current operations, but the entire history of Union covert action spanning centuries. Evidence of dozens of species manipulated, betrayed, or destroyed for Union strategic interests. This is bigger than we thought, Kira transmitted to the team. The Shadow Protocol isn't new. The Union has been using these tactics for over 800 years. We're just the latest targets. Copy everything, Maya ordered. This changes the entire equation. They escaped the headquarters without detection, but the mission had revealed a disturbing truth. The Galactic Union's corruption wasn't a recent development or a response to the Alliance's challenge. It was fundamental to how the Union had maintained power for millennia. The Shadow Protocol was just the name for tactics they had always used, now deployed against humanity and its allies. Back at Liberation Station, Rachel presented the evidence to Elena, Marcus, and the Alliance Council. The reaction was a mixture of horror and vindication. Everything they had suspected about the Union was true, documented in the Union's own archives. We could destroy them with this, Jackson said, looking at the evidence. Release it all. Show the galaxy what the Union really is. They'd lose all credibility. We could, Elena agreed, but that would cause chaos across known space. Billions of beings depend on Union institutions for trade, security, and basic services. If the Union collapses completely, The resulting instability could trigger conflicts that would kill millions. Marcus nodded slowly. We need to think strategically. The goal isn't destruction, it's transformation. We need to force the Union to change, to reform itself, without causing a galactic catastrophe. Representative Kessa, who had proven herself invaluable during the covert operations, offered a suggestion. Use the evidence as leverage. Approach the Union privately. Show them we have proof of everything. The Shadow Protocol, centuries of manipulation, all of it. Offer them a choice. Reform their institutions with alliance oversight, or we release everything and let the galaxy decide their fate. Elena considered this carefully. It was a gamble. The Union might choose to fight rather than accept reforms, but it was also an opportunity to achieve real change without the bloodshed that open conflict would bring. Arrange a meeting, she decided. Direct communication with Chancellor Vorin and the senior council members. No intermediaries, no diplomatic niceties. We're going to have an honest conversation about the future of galactic civilization. 2 weeks later, Elena Voss stood in a secure neutral station with Chancellor Vorin and 5 other senior Union Council members. The atmosphere was tense, both sides flanked by armed guards, both sides knowing that this conversation would determine the galaxy's future. Elena began without preamble. We know about the Shadow Protocol. We've dismantled most of your operations, identified your operatives, and gathered complete documentation. But we've also found something more significant. Your archives prove this corruption goes back centuries. She activated a holographic display showing highlights from the evidence. Operations against dozens of species, manipulations that had caused wars, famines, and extinctions, all conducted to maintain Union power. Chancellor Vorin's stone-like face showed the first real emotion Elena had ever seen from him: fear. If you release that information, you'll destroy the Union. Billions will suffer from the resulting chaos. We know, Elena replied calmly. That's why we're offering an alternative. The Union reforms itself with alliance oversight and participation. You establish real accountability, genuine protection for all member species regardless of strategic value, and transparent decision-making processes. In exchange, the evidence remains sealed. You're demanding we surrender our autonomy, one of the other council members protested. Accept alliance authority over Union affairs. No, Marcus interjected. We're demanding you honor the principles you claim to uphold. The Mutual Defense Accord you violated when you abandoned humanity. It becomes binding and enforced. The equal representation you promise but never deliver, it becomes reality. The transparency you pretend to practice, it becomes mandatory. Elena continued. The Alliance isn't trying to replace the Union. We're trying to make the Union actually function as it claims to. Both organizations can coexist, but only if the Union operates with genuine integrity instead of calculated corruption. The negotiations lasted 3 days. The Union Council fought every proposed reform, trying to minimize changes while maintaining their power structure. But Elena and her team remained firm, backed by evidence that gave them undeniable leverage. Finally, an agreement emerged. The Union would implement comprehensive reforms over 5 years, with Alliance observers monitoring compliance. Independent courts would be established to handle disputes without Council interference. Smaller species would receive guaranteed representation and voting power. Covert operations would be banned except with full Council approval and oversight. And most significantly, the Mutual Defense Accord would be rewritten to make protection automatic and universal, not subject to strategic calculations. This doesn't erase what you did to humanity, Elena said to Chancellor Vorin as they finalized the agreement. 8 billion of my people died because you decided they weren't worth saving. That stain remains on the Union forever. But maybe, if you actually honor these reforms, future species won't suffer the same abandonment. Vorin looked at her with something that might have been respect. You could have destroyed us, taken revenge for what was done to humanity. Why didn't you? Because revenge doesn't build a better future, Elena replied. Humanity survived the impossible. Not so we could become the same kind of threat you were to us, but so we could create something better. The Alliance exists to prove that protection doesn't have to be conditional, that strength can be used to defend the weak instead of exploiting them. She paused, then added, besides, complete destruction would have been too easy. Forcing you to actually live up to your principles, that's the real punishment. As Elena returned to Liberation Station, she found Marcus, Jackson, Sarah, and Rachel waiting in the command center. They had all been part of humanity's journey from abandonment to transformation, from victims to architects of galactic change. The Union has agreed to the reforms, Elena announced. It'll take years to implement, and we'll need to stay vigilant to ensure they honor the agreement. But we've achieved something remarkable. We forced change without causing collapse. Marcus smiled. You know what this means? We've done what seemed impossible again. Survived when they left us to die. Built an alliance from abandoned species and now reformed the Union itself. Humanity's specialty seems to be achieving the impossible. It's not just humanity, Sarah reminded them. It's everyone who refused to accept that being expendable was their fate. The Kelrath, the Shen, the Torvin, all the species that joined us. We achieved this together, Rachel added quietly. The Shadow Protocol is dismantled, but we should stay ready. There will always be forces that prefer the old ways, that see cooperation as weakness and exploitation as strength. Our vigilance can't end just because we won this battle. Elena nodded, knowing Rachel was right. The victory was significant but not final. Building a better galaxy was ongoing work, requiring constant effort and determination. She looked out at the stars, thinking about how far they'd come since that terrible day when Prometheus fell. The galaxy had mocked humanity's idealism, abandoned them to die, and assumed they would disappear into the void. Instead, humanity and its allies had transformed tragedy into purpose, survival into justice, and revenge into reform. They had proven that even those deemed expendable could rise to reshape the galactic order itself. The payback wasn't destruction or dominance. It was hope, accountability, and the determination to ensure no species would ever again be told they weren't worth saving. And in that achievement, humanity found something more valuable than revenge: the chance to build a galaxy where all life truly mattered.